Hello everybody, I'm Cara and it's a real privilege to be here. This is my first in-person conference in a very long time and I'm truly humbled by the amount of expertise that's sitting here in this room and amazed by all the ways that you're using R to try and improve life within the NHS, so well done to all of you. My background is from academia and then into the world of postgraduate medical exams, and I'm now a freelance data consultant specializing in data viz and what I'd like to call enhanced reproducible outputs. We've seen a few reproducible outputs already this afternoon, so I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that. And what drives me really is helping others maximize the impact of their expertise by saving some time, but also by helping you present things in a way that is really intuitive to the end users so that they can use all the research that you've done to make the right actions. Over the course of the next 5-6 minutes, we're going to be building a custom ggplot theme and applying it to some plots while I give you 3 reasons why I think you should consider using them for your own plots. So here are my 3 reasons. Add some text hierarchy to help orient your readers. Number 2, give everything some space to breathe. And number 3, effortlessly create aesthetic consistency throughout your data project. That is a lot harder to say than it is to read, and I realized that as I was working through this last night in preparation. So let's add a bit of text hierarchy to help orient the readers. Text hierarchy is one of those things that it's so much easier to demonstrate than it is to explain. So take a look at this image. What this is illustrating is that the way that you format your text guides the reader as to what's most important, what they need to go to first, and what it doesn't really matter if they skip over. Now, those of us creating data visualizations, we need to harness this so that we're in control of what the main message is, and that we are in control of what we don't mind people skipping over. So we're going to do a bit of that as we create our plot. When I ran my Level Up Your Plots workshop a couple of weeks ago, I asked participants what their favorite plot is. Mine is the bee swarm plot. So I'm going to use a basic bee swarm plot and we're going to iterate on that. I'm using the Palmer Penguins dataset and I'm using the Colorblinder package for the color palette that we've got here. So here is what I'm going to call our basic plot. And the first tweak that I think pretty much everybody here has already done is to use theme minimal to get rid of that grey background. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it just makes it a less obvious ggplot outcome. And the next thing we want to do is create some different text colors so that we can add some of that text hierarchy. Here what I'm doing is I'm starting with a dark text color, which is just the text color that I'm using actually for the rest of my text in my slides. And I'm going to feed it into a package called Monochroma that I created to do these kind of gradients of color. And this gives us a palette that's all based on the same starting color. From this, we're going to use the second one here, this column, as our mid-text color. But you can use as many text colors as you want to, so you might want to use an even lighter one for some light text color for the stuff that it really doesn't matter if people skip over. Don't go too light, though, because people won't be able to read it. So just make sure that you're picking sensible colors for that. And then we're going to go back and apply this to our plot. So this is where we were. This is probably going to be quite subtle, but I've just made all of the plot by default have that slightly lighter gray color. I'm going to override it in the title so that the title is a bit darker and do the same thing for the axis labels. So if you keep your eye on the axis labels, you'll see that they go a bit more faded when we do this. Next thing I want to do is bring in my own fonts. Fonts can be really fiddly, so I've put a link at the bottom of the slide there for all your troubleshooting needs. It's an absolutely brilliant resource that I recommend to everybody. And then I'm going to change the size and the relative size of the elements within that. So you can do that using the relative size command, or you can do it setting absolute sizes, for which the default, I believe, is points. And we'll come back later to why the relative size can be quite a useful thing to have done. But even just in this text hierarchy step, you can see that we've gone from a plot in which there was all the information that we needed, but it was just a little bit all in your face and you weren't quite sure which bit to start with, to a plot where there's a main story that stands out, some text, and it breathes a little bit better. I think we can make it breathe a little bit more. So let's move on to point number 2, give everything some space to breathe. Here is our starting point again. And the first thing we're going to do is just fade those grid lines. We don't need them to be quite as dark as they were. We're going to get rid of an unnecessary axis label because we didn't need that one this time round. We're going to move our legend to reduce unnecessary eye movement. So rather than looking from the side to the plot to the dots, let's just put it all out there, but then let's just move it out of the way a little bit. It doesn't really need to be quite as prominent as it was. Then we're going to change the default line height throughout our text. Again, just giving everything a little bit more space. And finally, we can add some margins around some of our text elements, just to move your title away from the subtitle away from the plot, and so on and so forth. I quite like to remember the word trouble, to remember where everything goes in terms of the order. When you're putting in these numbers, you're going top, right, bottom, left, or you can just remember that it goes clockwise from the top. But I find trouble a little bit easier because I'm not very good at left and right. So we've added that. Then we can add a bit of margin around the plot itself. And if you were eagle-eyed earlier when I had the dark background, you'll notice that the text was getting quite close to the edge. So I'm going to just go and change the size of the base size of the text, move it down from 12 to 11. And this is where you thank your past self for having used relative sizes for all the other elements in the plot, so you don't have to go and change all of those manually. And here's where we are. So we've given everything a bit more space to breathe, same plot, same data, same pieces of information, but it just stands out in a way that your readers find it much easier to engage with. The final thing is that aesthetic consistency that we talked about earlier. What we're going to do is apply that don't repeat yourself principle that we've been talking about throughout today. Instead of just copy pasting this after every plot, we're going to turn this into a function. So all you do is you wrap it in your curly brackets, make it into a function. You can give it a base size to start with, which means that you can then alter that every time you use it, and then you call it inside the function. We also need to give it a dark text color to start from. I realized that when I was putting these slides together, wondering why it wasn't bringing in the text color. So make sure you put your text color there, and then you can create your mid text and your light text within the function. For those of you wondering, should I use the plus sign or the replace function when you're modifying theme minimal plus? I use the plus so that I can build on the elements that are inside theme minimal. But if you use replace, it just wipes out the entire element. You can read more about that again at the link at the bottom. And now what we can do is go and apply that to any dataset that we want. So here is one using MT cars. I don't understand enough about cars for this dataset to be useful for me, but I know a lot of people quite like using it. Here's one with the orange dataset. Again, just one line of code, and we've made it look exactly like the other ones. Here, what we can do is still modify things if we want to. So actually, it turns out that the x-axis label is quite useful in this plot. So we can go and put that back in, and that's the beauty of using the plus operator. Change the sizes. Here's one with the tooth growth plot, where we might want to go and format the way that the strips are labeled. And this is all in the interest of consistency. So here is some example of some plots for a project I've just finished wrapping up with R for the Rest, where we used the theming of the International Vaccine Access Centre, created a theme package for them so that they could apply that to their plots. And you can see the consistency that comes from doing that. Now, you might argue that some of that consistency comes from the colours. Let's just check. Here are the plots that we've created today, in which I've made no effort whatsoever to reconcile the colours, and having that theme does give it a little bit more unity. So there we go, we made it to the end, and we've added some text hierarchy, we've given everything some space to breathe, and we've created some consistency throughout the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cara.